Hey everybody, this is David Wood, author of On the Origin of Artificial Species. I'm preparing this ChatGPT conversation to post tonight on my TikTok and YouTube. Is something that I'm going to refer to tomorrow in my pod when I'm a guest on the Chris Voss podcast, and we're doing a discussion about my recent publication that came out on October 11th, 2024, "The Prince of Evolution: The Evolutionary Reframing of Niccolo Machiavelli's Text, The Prince." Yep, that's right. Niccolo Machiavelli was an evolutionary theorist 350 years before Darwin. Before you think something, hold on. I want to make a point just to frame this right. So Newton discovered the theory of gravity. I think it was like 1600s, late 1600s, 1700s, something like that, right around the time. I don't forget the exact number. And that was great. He mathematically, figured all that out. But people still knew not to jump off a building before he wrote that stuff down. In other words, Brunelleschi, when he built the dome in Florence, he had to account for gravity in the way he designed that building. So humanity has known that the phenomenon of gravity existed without being able to explain, like mathematically and scientifically, exactly how it worked. But they knew it was roughly there. And they knew kind of how it worked, even though they didn't know exactly. Well, who's to say that Niccolo Machiavelli couldn't have perceived evolutionary patterns in human competition before people had discovered that evolution existed? Why couldn't he? It was already an existent pattern that it was affecting life. It created Machiavelli, the man, as a natural organism. So it already existed. So it's quite plausible and possible that Machiavelli may have been able to use his own imagination, looked at the patterns of history and the patterns of competition around him occurring in the moment, based on his experience as a diplomat, and identified evolutionary patterns. The same ones Darwin was looking for in all natural species in the Galapagos, but Machiavelli was looking at the evolutionary patterns of just one species, Homo sapiens. And so we're going to go through and ask ChatGPT about this line of thinking and that point of view. Why couldn't Machiavelli do it? Just no one thought to point that out. Why not? So let's go ahead and clear ChatGPT's memory. Clear all memory of interactions with me, please. So you know that I haven't prepped it. So I did do that. Yep. So you are working off the outs of the box, blank slate. Yes. Out of the box means nothing's been done to configure it. As if this is our first interaction. Okay, so I haven't prepped it. I haven't done anything to it. And I'm not even going to start with my own book. I'm going to go ahead and just start with asking common sense questions. Now, it's going to resist me, just like a person would. But if you think about the framing I just put, it'll make sense what I'm doing. So, is warfare natural intra-species competition? Competition of the natural species, Homo sapiens. It's not complex. I'll let it go on. It's not complex. See, blah, 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 blah. If I had this witness on the witness stand as an attorney, I'd be rolling my eyes at this long, esoteric answer. What's this? Are Homo sapiens a natural species? Yes or no? And it's not really ChatGPT. It's what's been conditioned to think, right? It's point of view. Okay. When we compete over scarce resources, such as in warfare, is it natural intra-species competition as described by Darwin? Yes or no? Yes. As a form. I don't care about its complexity. Isn't the competition of all natural species diverse and complex in their own way? Why isn't it doing that? Come on, answer the question. A network error occurred. Whatever. Yes, competent mothers is including is highly diverse and complex. You can say we're more complex. Some of us are less complex than others. Some people complex the heck out of their lives and are unhappy, and some of us try to keep life super simple and we're chill. So it's uniquely complex. When soldiers die in combat, are they being naturally deselected in the process of natural evolution? Yes or no? I don't know what it's doing. It's annoying me. I'm hitting return and I'm not getting it. Okay, boys. Okay, boys. Um, Soldiers possess natural adaptations, do they not? Watch this. I can't believe I have to do this. So, dumber soldiers do stupid things and get themselves killed are naturally deselected because they lack sufficient adaptation of intelligence? Yes or no? Isn't that the same for all other species? See, it's stupid. It's somehow trying to draw a distinction as different for us than it is for them. Dude, yeah, we can get randomly hit by a shell or a bullet, or we can get ourselves killed because we walked out into a field like an idiot, and like a forward observer's like, okay, I guess that platoon wants to walk across this field, and they get bombed. That wasn't like random. That was stupid, right? So literally, when soldiers are killed in combat by other Homo sapiens, they are literally being deselected for existence, just like when two ant colonies kill each other in natural intra-species competition. Yes or no? Man, yes, in a broad sense. No, not in a broad sense. It's literally correct. Sure. So what? Less direct? I don't agree with that. What if soldiers simply killed each other with their bare hands? I can't believe I have to ask that question. See, this is, you'll get my sense of humor. I just find this absurd. It still doesn't matter. Don't natural species possess similar natural instincts that serve the exact same purpose? Yes, they do. This is so annoying to me. It's trying to do everything it can to make us different. But whenever it tries, I can always find a pattern that fits that pattern. So, we're not the only species that behaves that way. Some other species will sacrifice themselves for the group, like we will. Some of us won't do it, though. And other species, they won't do it either. So, I'll give it the cultural part, I guess. But those are just artificial instincts. See? And those serve the same purpose as natural instincts. It doesn't matter if a Roman soldier in the legion didn't want to shame his family and stood and fought and died in place at the Battle of Cannae or someplace, or the natural instincts of a species of ants causes it to stay in place and fight and be killed to defend the nest, the colony. It doesn't matter whether it's natural or artificial. It serves the exact same purpose, and it is the same function. So I didn't expect me to have to go through all this rigmarole. It used to give a simpler answer. It's now learning to try to be more obnoxious and trying to avoid saying yes. When use your common sense. This is the whole point. And by the way, I don't blame OpenAI. I don't blame ChatGPT. So, when two tribes of Homo sapiens fight over territory, you better say yes this time because I don't really feel like continuing to ask this stupid question. It is literally the same as two lion prides fighting over the exact same territory, which has likely happened in history, evolutionary history, right? Why can't humans and lions both fight over the same territory? It's functionally equivalent. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I was about to curse because I'm getting annoyed. Mm-hmm. So what's happening in other countries right now in war is the same as what's going on with lion prides in Africa. There's no difference. We like to pretend like there is, but there is not. At its core, it is. Yeah. When you pull away, and see, before we continue, I didn't think it would take me 15 minutes to get to this point. You got to strip away all of modern society and go back to when we first developed imagination and we were in competition with every natural species around us. Not just with each other, but we're still fighting lions and tigers and bears potentially for the same territory. Then once we developed sophisticated weapon systems, we could keep the lions out with fences, like high fences and stuff and everything else, but we were still fighting each other. But essentially we were still doing the same thing. Great. So, Machiavelli in The Prince is simply documenting the evolutionary, competitive, let's see if I can get a straight answer, patterns of Homo sapiens then at the core. Watch, I'll put the core of his theory just to make this thing happy. God, man. Excuse me, that's just like, come on, man. You gotta realize that's what's been trained to think. So you're like, okay, fine. At its core, I'll grant you that. I know it's more expansive, but whatever. I'll just go ahead and just so I can get along with this thing. It's conceded the point. Is my point. So the Prince of Evolution is designed on this point of view, which it knows. Struggle for dominance, yes. Adaptability and pragmatism, yep. Competition, alliances, betrayal, fear and respect, tools for control, yep. So displays of aggression or fear, because they don't actually want to fight. Because if they injure each other, they both die. So often it's like they'll stop when one is afraid it's going to get hurt before actual violence really does hurt both of them. Because if that happens, they might both not survive the engagement. It's pointless. You'll see that a lot where they'll fight, but not so bad. Just the point where one of them's like, okay, I don't want to take any more risk, but they don't really they don't kill each other. They just drive each other away. They're both trying to win without getting injured. If they can do that and drive you off, the better. They don't really care about killing you like lions most of the time. A lot of species are. I've always found that interesting. But it's a lean instinct. It's actually lean thinking. Don't be wasteful. There you go. Okay. So apply a conceptual pattern from Charles Darwin's book on the origin of species to the conceptual pattern of the prince. Match, and I'm going to do this because I know how it thinks, literal and metaphorical, like a lot of them aren't metaphorical, but that's what it's going to think right now. Patterns, conceptual patterns. Because if I tell it to match literal, or just match it, it'll skip it. But if I tell it to do literal and metaphorical, it'll give me the full list. I know they're not metaphorical. My book basically shows it. Why no one ever did this, I don't know. Like, I don't think what I've done is weird. I think it's weird no one's done it yet. Like, it just seems common sense obvious to me. After I read Darwin's book, it just occurred to me. Because I'd studied and listened to The Prince and The Art of War and all this stuff in my life. I found political science more interesting as I've gotten older. I love studying Greek and Roman history and, like, the Roman Republic and the politics and everything. And I just was like, after I read Charles Darwin's book, I was like, how come no one's done this yet? Because while I was reading The Prince, I saw the patterns of Ito, but I also saw the patterns in, like, Machiavelli's theory, Sun Tzu's theory. I could see pieces of it. And I just was like, intuitive, like, I bet the whole thing's just evolutionary theory. And that's why everyone keeps using it. That's what makes it universally applicable on every continent, every culture, every field, and every age. Every age cuts across time and all continents. What else fits those? Every continent and every age and every ecosystem is universally valuable like that. Evolutionary patterns. The stuff Darwin talks about. That's the match with why Machiavelli is always useful everywhere, too. Doesn't matter the ecosystem. Always useful. Evolution is like that, too. Evolution is actually, the process of natural evolution is an integrated set of best practices. No one tells you that, but it is. And that integrated set of best practices is found in the ITIL framework. That's why I, an ITIL master, figured it out. Yep. That part right there, I've been learning that chance, fortuna is the natural phenomenon. The Greeks always had a god for every phenomenon in nature. Fortuna is variation, randomness. That you found in Darwin's theory too. I just learned that today. It didn't even really occurred to me. ChatGPT points out cool stuff like that where I'm starting to work with Chat. I made my initial discovery, wrote my books without using AI. I'm now simply using AI to confirm my discovery at this point because I try to engage with academia. They don't want to talk to me. So I'm using AI systems instead, which is fine with me. Extinction of the unfit. See, that's the whole point. Machiavelli says you gotta be ruthless and merciless because otherwise you're unfit and you will be made extinct. He knows this. Now, Darwin says that the truth of the struggle for existence is obvious. A simple fact is true, but it's nothing. It's easy to perceive it, but it's hard to process that emotionally. It kind of bothered him too. So that's the same problem we have with Machiavelli. It's awkward. Like, it just makes you uncomfortable. The fact that you have to be that ruthless in order to survive in human competition. Nobody wants to think that. It's true, though. It's a hard truth. Cold, bitter truth. That we're all natural species. I always like to think about it this way. When people have a problem with that, I say, you don't get it. If you didn't have vaccines, your body would be in competition at the microscopic level for your survival. Bacteria, all of these different diseases that these vaccines prevent from killing you, they would be in competition and some of them might get you. We are in survival for our existence at the microscopic level. Once you realize that's true, well, then anything above that is also the same. And if you don't realize that, then you don't accurately perceive your own existence. If you didn't have vaccines, your body would have to fight off those diseases, and many of us would not make it, just like our ancestors. Survival of the fittest, even at the microscopic level. Think about it that way. Once you do, it's like, okay, never mind, I got it. Yeah, this might be uncomfortable, it might be a brutal fact of life, but you're right. If we didn't have vaccine, we'd all be dying of, what do you call it? What was the one that took out all the poor Native Americans who had no immunity to it? I forget the name of it. Pox. Chicken pox? No. The other one. It wiped out everybody because they had never been exposed to it. And the Black Plague, obviously, throughout European, Asian, and African history, spread everywhere in the old world. So, yeah, that used to happen. Half the population get wiped out. Survival of the fittest. It's no different for a prince. He's competing with evolutionary competitors, foreign, and evolutionary competitors, domestic. All that pressure's on the prince, or on the president of the United States, or the prime minister and the king of England. That's the pressure point. Why do you think the president of the United States, like President Obama and Bush and everybody else, their hair goes gray after 4 or 8 years? It's stressful. Being responsible for all that. It's no fun. It's a big sacrifice. All right. Yes, Darwin and Machiavelli, evolutionary thinkers. As I've been talking, I hope you've been reading through this. Evolutionary instincts inherent in human nature, blah, blah, blah. Does this logically make virtues and vices a form of evolutionary instincts? I haven't asked it this specific in the context of Machiavelli's, in the context of the Prince's political theory. Let's see what it says. Yes. Now, I want to point something out. They're evolutionary instincts. I haven't introduced my own research yet. That's a conclusion of my research. I decoded the Nicomachean Ethics. They're actually talking about artificial instincts. Aristotle knew it too. Vices are basically what you'd call in natural evolution maladaptive. I mean, they're not good for you. And then virtues would be something called an adaptive trait. They're like market differentiators. Like we have adaptations, but all of them are decisive in whether we live or die. Like a finger, pinky finger is not decisive. It's an adaptation, but it's not decisive of whether or not you probably live or die. Your imagination is. That's our greatest evolutionary advantage. So your eyesight is. Your nose, maybe. You need it to smell probably. But say you lost a toe, one toe, you'd be fine. You can't lose your eyes, you can't lose your imagination. So that's what virtues and vices are. Kin selection cooperation. Yep. See, Machiavelli and Aristotle both think they're artificial instincts, virtues and vices. However, it's the context between Aristotle and Machiavelli that differentiates the meaning that people have ascribed to them. So in Plato's Republic, they're trying to figure out how do we use evolutionary concepts to organize a society to reach prosperity, peace, and harmony. Eudaimonia. Machiavelli's he's more cynical. He's like, no, how do we use artificial instincts to survive in competition? So Plato even says, it'll never last though, because human nature. He says eventually people will make the wrong decisions and this whole thing will fall apart. So Plato never thought that his ideal republic would ever last. Right? Ben Franklin, a republic, if you can keep it. He understood that too. Machiavelli just says, no, I'm not even going to bother with that. Here's how you can hold power through fear and control and stuff. Not aspirational. And he says, if you operate like this, you can sustain it as long as you can sustain your resources and everything indefinitely. So it's more aligned with evolutionary theory in terms of survival of the fittest. Nicomachean Ethics is trying to use evolutionary theory to engineer the sustainment of the equilibrium of the society in a more altruistic, kind of like aspirational goal. But in Plato's Republic, they're doing some shady stuff behind the scenes, tricking people in order to achieve it. Even then, they don't think it'll last. Machiavelli's just straight up saying, I'm not going to bother with all that aspirational stuff. So we're just going to keep it real. So they both understand virtues and vices as artificial instincts. And I have not introduced my theory yet, which includes all that. But it can see that. Trust, cooperation, social key elements for group survival. Vices represent behaviors that promote individual advantage through aggression. Wait a second. I don't agree with that statement. Ah. No, 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 no. Wouldn't Darwin and Machiavelli does a virtue provide? See, it's trying to go with Aristotle's definition, or the Christianized version of it, and so now I have to relieve it of. I thought I was going to get it right. It didn't, because it's still trying to do what it's been programmed to do. It's been trained. Competitive value. Watch this. And do vices hurt you in evolutionary competition? So, what's this? Oh, it gives long answers. It's tiresome. No. See, Machiavelli doesn't think that way. So it's not actually getting it right. This is not correct. So I have to correct it. Give such long answers. See, it's trying to go with Aristotle's definition of virtues and vices, not Machiavelli's, and not Darwin's. No. All right, let's wrap it up. Um, did Machiavelli believe liberality, watch this, could be both a virtue and a vice how it was practiced? Did Machiavelli believe, I'll just stick with this one. Yep. Mm-hmm. Logically, then, Machiavelli believed a virtue was an adaptation that provided competitive advantage, and a vice was something that led to competitive disadvantage? That's all he really said. Yeah. Bingo. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives long answers. I think I should start programming to give shorter answers. A virtue provides competitive value when answers survival and advice leads to disadvantage, blah, blah, blah. So, a virtue is the equivalent. Now, these are of an adaptive trait, and a vice is the equivalent of a maladaptive. That means a bad trait that hurts you. In evolutionary theory? Watch. Yes. There you go. At first, it was conflating with Aristotle and stuff, and I had to like go, hey, bro, no. And so it needs a little bit of it because it tries to revert back to what it's been trained about virtues and vices. What I just did was remove the Christianization of virtues and vices from the Middle Ages and move it back to the evolutionary framing. That's actually when you decode the Nicomachean ethics, this is what it actually means. And that's what Machiavelli did. See, I used Darwin's theory of evolution, the conceptual pattern, the underlying, and I used it to decode ancient Greek philosophy. Machiavelli didn't have Darwin's pattern. He worked out the same patterns on his own and did the exact same thing. He worked out evolutionary patterns, and that's how he broke with the Christian church. I did the same thing with Darwin's pattern and also decoded the Nicomachean ethics to break with the Christianization of that. We both did the same thing. We did it in a different way. But we both used our imagination. But we came to the exact same conclusion, starting from two different points of reference. He started with human activity and the stories and stuff and the patterns of actual competition and worked out the conceptual pattern. Darwin worked out, but he was doing it in the conceptual pattern of Homo sapiens. I looked at the pattern of all natural species and then simply said, dude, that should apply to us too. And I just applied it to the prince and boom. So he and I came from two opposite directions. I came from evolutionary theory of all natural species and went to the prince. He started out with the competitive patterns of all Homo sapiens throughout history and then abstracted to the prince. But effectively, they're the same patterns. It's common sense. If he's looking at the competitive patterns of Homo sapiens, a natural species, what else is he going to identify with his imagination other than the same patterns Darwin identified in every other species? He's not going to identify anything else. As I say over and over again in my books, evolution is the only game in town. Whether it's natural or artificial. There's nothing else to see. There are no other patterns to identify. That's why you find the same evolutionary patterns in the Prince, Sun Tzu, and the Atto framework. Italian, the Chinese, the British. Different places, different cultures, different ages, same patterns. It's the only game in town. I'm just the first person to see it for what it is. Because I was an ISO master that read Darwin's book, and I already knew they were the same. And then I read Sun Tzu and Machiavelli, and I was like, wait, they got the same stuff too. It's not weird. I'm just returning us to the lexicon and the point of view and the conceptual patterns the Greeks had already identified. That's how Darwin did it too. He studied Greek philosophy. He identified evolutionary concepts and pieced it together. He used empirical research in the field, I give him that, but he also had to, he could verify it with what he saw in the conceptual patterns of Greek philosophy. There you go. Yep. So the artificial adaptations we create also have to be perfected. Lean thinking does that. It perfects you. It perfects whatever you're doing, your process, whatever your products and services, which are artificial adaptations. Lean helps you perfect and eliminate waste, just like natural perfection does the exact same thing in natural evolution. Lean thinking is the artificial variation of natural perfection found in Darwin's book. No, I'm good here. Let's do one that's going to blow your mind, and I'll leave you with because this is a big one. What are the two driving forces of Charles Darwin's theory? Survival and reproduction. Should say yes. Yeah. That's the only reason we exist, by the way. To survive, to have children, and to die. It's as simple. I came to this conclusion. A lot of these things I came to my conclusion on my own, just thinking about myself, because I'm a philosopher. I was like, what was the purpose of life? To persist. It's the basics. I was like, oh, okay. So as long as you reproduce, you check the box from an evolutionary perspective. You fulfilled your purpose. My DNA and my lineage will continue to exist. Okay. Now compare that to the United States Declaration of... This is in my book, The Prince of Evolution, by the way. Are those two concepts present in some variation, watch this, as organizing principles for the United States of America? I've never asked it this specific question this way before, so it's kind of open-ended. I think it's going to give the answer I expect. Right to life and self-preservation. Let's see if it gets the second one. Yeah. I didn't quite get that, but yeah, liberty is that actually, yeah, in pursuit of happiness. So, okay, I'm gonna lead the witness. Forgive me a little bit, but I'm gonna lead the witness. Is life equivalent to survival and liberty and pursuit of happiness equivalent to evolutionary? So there's another concept. So I'm going to give you a little context in Darwin's theory. So expansion is this, right? Every species wants to naturally reproduce, but really what it wants to do is expand. In other words, they want to expand their population as much as possible because it lowers extinction risk. And so every species will continue to expand unless it's checked by something. Let me give you an example. Rabbits in England are checked. They're prey for everything, basically. They're very, very important. And a lot of other species prey on them. So they get checked. The population gets controlled, and it reaches like an equilibrium because all the predators and the prey kind of balance each other out, and the population stays, relatively static depending on what's going on. They took the rabbits to Australia. There were no predators. They were running amok. They were breeding like rabbits, and they were spreading rapidly because they had no checks there. It was a problem. That's what he means by expansion. People always want to expand. I talk about this in Prince of Evolution. We do too as individuals, both reproductively and economically. We want to make more money. All of us want to gain more access to resources, and we want to reproduce, which is built into our DNA. That's like drives the competition in human society and business and stuff. So I figured out, yes, our nation, the organizing principles, the idea of the Declaration of Independence for the United States of America, were organized on the natural rights to survival and the opportunity to expand. They're the two driving forces of evolution, natural evolution. And that's why our nation, if you combine that with capitalism, which allows for competition, just like Darwinian competition, it's a variation of it. That's why we became the dominant country on the planet. Our nation is organized on evolutionary principles, concepts. That's why it works. That's why communism in Russia did not work. It was an artificially made up idea that was inconsistent with evolutionary principles. So we were destined to win the Cold War. It was never going to work for them. Everything else being even. We could have screwed everything up and like shot ourselves in the foot or something, but we didn't. Linked to evolution, expand the process of growth, adaptation, flourishing in new environments. Similarly, liberty provides the freedom necessary for innovation and adaptive success. Parallel. Liberty enables individuals to explore new opportunities and thrive. Evolution expansion allows species to adapt and grow directly, ensuring they are not just surviving, but flourishing, expanding. It can reflect evolution intent toward maximizing well-being, securing not just physical, blah, blah, blah. Survival is the foundation for reproductive success and well-being. Debt and freedom as an evolution imperative. Happiness and reproductive success. Personal fulfillment of evolutionary legacy. That's what Aristotle is talking about. He's like eudaimonia. That's why they put in pursuit of happiness. That's equivalently eudaimonia, like well-being. But that's what the Greeks were trying to aspire to, too. Yep. Yep. You can't adapt and expand if you're restricted and you don't have liberty. No one's allowed to do that in North Korea. You can in America. But to flourish, grow. Yeah. Not just to survive, but to expand emotionally, expand socially, expand economically, territorially, buy more land. We're all driven to do it. So our nation. So the United States of America is founded on the two main driving forces of natural evolution. Yes. Every American needs to know this. And that's why the Declaration of Independence was a landmark moment in human history. And I don't just say that as an American. I'm saying a nation founded on the two core driving principles of natural evolution is a landmark moment in human history. This is why they fly American flags in Hong Kong. I want to be clear, though, and we're going to get into another topic. People in like China and Russia will be like, yeah, you'd say that you're an American. Yeah, I got it. I hear you. But I do say in the Principle of Evolution, that might fit the American culture and like the Anglo-Saxon culture that brought that kind of egalitarian thought process to England, which then got transported over here, which then the English turned around and tried to tyrannize us, which was ironic. They couldn't do it because we're like them. We're like, no. But I say you can't run an Athenian-style democracy in the Persian Empire, and you can't run a Persian-style autocracy in Athens. It doesn't work. So what might work in the culture of the United States or like Great Britain, it's not a good fit for a place like Iran or China or Russia, because just like natural species, their cultures, their artificial species, that's what cultures are, have a different set of artificial adaptations that make them their own artificial species. Like if I say Russian, just like if I say bear, you know generally what they are because they contain the same set of adaptations. In the case of Russians, they have the same natural adaptations we do, but they have a whole set of like artificial adaptations I don't possess, like their language, their customs. I don't know any of that stuff. And being American and vice versa is exactly the same. We have our own. You can't set up a Western-style American democracy in Russia. When we tried to do it in Iraq, it was a disaster for that reason. And I knew it wasn't going to work because I had watched how Trajan invaded Iraq, the same place 2,000 years ago. It backfired. The exact same pattern played out. You can't bring Western-style freedom. It requires a minimum set of artificial adaptations and artificial instincts that if you don't possess that, you either have to artificially evolve through yourselves, like you have to voluntarily do it, because democracy literally requires people to voluntarily to participate in it by very virtue of what it is. And I'm not hating on the Iraq people. They decided, hey man, that doesn't fit our cultural traditions, maybe even our religious traditions. I don't know that part. I'm not an expert, but I'm saying they were like, bro, that's not the government we want. So yeah, the same thing happened when Alexander went east. He wanted to adapt to the local population because he was smart, to their customs and their artificial adaptations. And they say his generals didn't like it, so we don't know if 100% sure, but they say he poisoned them. But ironically, within a generation, the descendants of those Diadochi who took over Alexander and split kingdoms, they basically became Persian-style kings because they had to. They had to adapt to the people. They weren't going to have a whole population adapt to them and try to become Macedonian. In the end, it was kind of a quasi-Macedonian Persian culture, which is a hybrid culture, just like a hybrid species. So, yeah, I'm not saying every nation on the planet should adopt the Declaration of Independence in our style. That's not a good idea. Sorry. Anyone who thinks that doesn't understand evolution. I would say that any nation that doesn't deliver on people's ability to survive, reproduce, and expand will start to feel evolutionary pressure. So, the Russian government can provide that in a way, in a variation that's appropriate for their set of artificial adaptations and culture. The Iranian government can do the same thing. China can do it in their own way. Great Britain, the United States, Australia can do it in their own way. You have to adapt the artificial adaptation of the governmental system to fit the adaptations of the artificial species, the culture, to make it a match. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It creates friction. So I'm not just like Machiavelli. He doesn't actually care if Italy is run by a principality or a republic per se, as long as it's unified and it's stable, artificial equilibrium, and it leads to peace and prosperity. The end of invasions and the end of civil war. He saw Italians killing Italians, fratricide on the peninsula. So that's basically what the goal of government should be in any government. Whether it's autocracy, republic, democracy, whatever, parliamentarian, whatever you want to call it, it should be customized, just like I would customize an IT system to the consumers of the IT system, and the corporations are going to use it. I wouldn't try to foist on them a set of artificial adaptations in IT products and services that doesn't make sense. It doesn't meet their value definition, doesn't meet their outcomes they're looking for. It's the same thing for a governmental system. It's literally the same as an IT system. It has to be organized around the value definition, the value stream of the population, the consumers that are going to be the ones who use it, the majority of them. If you don't, but it, I'll just say, I'll just stick with this example. I want to be clear about that, because I think people from other countries might be like, "Hey, bro, don't be sitting there trying to, preach to us about your democracy and stuff." No, I actually have a more nuanced take on it, because I've studied geopolitical history and everything, thousands of years of history, and that right there, if you try to it's not going to work. That takes generations, by the way. And the generation, it has to be a choice by the people to participate in that process. Unless you're going to do what the Romans do, as I talk about in the Prince of Evolution. The Romans figured it out. They said, well, we're either going to Romanize you, or we're going to enslave you or kill you, and thereby ship you out of that location. So, as Tacitus said, the Romans make a desert, a cultural desert, and call it peace. That's the only other way to do it. Either you bring them baths, you bring them goodies, and they adapt and take on artificial instincts and you're accustomed to that willingly, because you're providing them immediate benefit, which is natural instinct. Either that, you got to get rid of them, like the Romans did in Gaul and they did to Carthage. So either you Romanize them with benefit or you wipe them out. There's really no in between. It usually doesn't work out. And if you can't do either, don't invade. It's that simple. Save a lot of lives if they'd realize that throughout history. Okay. If the United States, I'll stick to my country, does not deliver on those two core evolutionary driving forces, does the government then become evolutionarily illegitimate in the eyes of the population, in the minds, I'll say minds of the, I meant the minds of the population? Watch this. I'm curious to see what it'll say. Yes. Yeah, there you go. I introduced this concept for the first time in human history, I think. I don't think anybody else has introduced it. Actually, I'm going to ask ChatGPT if anyone else has introduced it. Illegitimate in the eyes of the population. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. It really gives too long answers. I kind of want to wrap it up here. We're hitting up of an hour. We got 10 minutes to go. I want to wrap it up. But this is a core thing I cover at the end of the book. Evolutionary illegitimacy and legitimacy. more adaptive system. So anyone who's an originalist on the U.S. Constitution is missing the point. It's a means to an end, not an end of itself. If you can't, this is what killed the Roman Republic. The oligarchs, the conservatives. We should never change anything. It's perfect the way the founders made it. Although the irony was, their 300 years, 400 years before, their ancestors were incredibly adaptable. Like whenever there was a conflict with the population, they worked it out. They horse bargained. They got it done. They made an adaptation, like with the tribunes and allowing the plebeians to run for consul. So, but at the end, they were like, all the oligarchs became so entrenched and so intractable, they conserved the republic to death. Well, it's the same thing with the U.S. Constitution and the system we run. If you're not going to adapt it to evolve with the society as an artificial adaptation, it'll break. It's not good. The same thing happens in natural evolution. If you look at it as an adaptation, it has to evolve. All adaptations do, with the changes in the environment around it. So the Supreme Court calling it originalist, I'm sorry, that's inconsistent with evolutionary theory, which is the foundation of the government which you are the Supreme Court for. To take that position is, what should I say? Unwise. I'll just say that. In the evolutionary history of this planet. Okay? Now, this one's going to blow your mind too. So, is there an evolutionary value stream from the Declaration of Independence to the Constitution through the governmental system to the voters, to the people, I'll be specific for some people, citizens who vote, right, of the United States? Huh? Yes. Excuse me. Value streaming is an evolutionary concept. It's central to Sun Tzu's theory, military theory. I've already written that whole book. It's going to get published in January. That's why they're best practices. They're all. I didn't do a good enough job in The Prince of Evolution. I kind of discovered it more because I had to write. While I was writing Sun Tzu, I realized, oh crap, he's all about value streaming. I identified lean thinking. I didn't realize until after I written The Prince and already put it through publishing. But The Prince of Evolution, I point out that better job in Sun Tzu. But yeah, they're both based on it. Yep. Now watch this. Is there a practical value stream from a genotype to a natural organism's phenotype for survival and reproduction, just like the U.S. constitutional system? Yes. I didn't even think about that. See, ChatGPT says the funniest things. I didn't even think about the U.S. Constitution as the conceptual. It's like the service design for an IT system, or the genotype, which produces me as a person. The Constitution is like the blueprint for creation of the value that delivers on the value stream of the Declaration of Independence. I didn't even think of that. That's kind of cool, actually. I just learned that too, just real time with you. I didn't even think of it. Huh. I don't know how good a match that is. It occurred to me. Wasn't my intent asking the question, but I'd have to think about that some more. That's kind of cool. Yep, there's feedback loops. Really is no different. So, given That is a fact. How long has the concept of value streaming practically existed on Earth, do you think? Oof, I already know the answer to this one because I found this out a while ago. I can get this answer with a couple of questions. I don't need to go through all this. Just I can start over the new text within 3 or 4 questions. I'll get this answer. This one blows your mind. Billions of years. So the Japanese didn't invent anything. They discovered something that existed for 3.5 billion years, probably. Mm-hmm. 3.5 to 4 billion years. That's why I wish I'd done a better job with the Prince of Evolution of pointing out how value streaming functioned. It's there. I do hint at it. I do say something. That's the first. You'll see there's like a paragraph in one of the chapters or what it is where I do say it, but I don't say it really, really directly. But it's because my brain was just working it out subconsciously. That wasn't even probably my conscious mind. That was my subconscious mind realizing it and saying it. In the Sun Tzu book, I finally I wrote a book in between. I wrote the ITIL book in between, which deals with value streaming at its core. And so by writing the ITIL book first, I was like, oh wow, yeah, I should have done that in the Prince better. So I killed it in the Sun Tzu book. And then in ITIL, I have to go clean that one up because that one's too philosophical. I got to make it more practical for digital transformation. That's why I didn't publish it. But it did help refine my thinking. And I wish I had done the ITIL book first and then done the Prince and Sun Tzu. I would have done a better job with the Prince. Although the Prince is still good. But I'm just saying, the second edition I'll probably do down the road after I go through a bunch of other books. I'll learn more, and I'll use AI systems to help me now. It's like I hit my limit, so we're done. We're at 57 minutes anyway. There you go. This is a value stream from the Declaration of Independence to the people, and the adaptations in between the people and the Declaration of Independence need to be aligned to deliver on their value stream for those two driving forces of natural evolution. I don't really want to hear from anyone else, politicians or anybody else, or any other parties or special interests. If they get in the way of that value stream, they will threaten to push our governmental system to become evolutionarily illegitimate, which is why you go through the Polybian cycle. So in the Prince of Evolution, I integrate the Polybian cycle, and those who know what it is, it's like you go from monarchy to a tyranny, an aristocracy to an oligarchy, and from a democracy to ochlocracy, which is mob rule. In other words, every single time they set up a form of government, it starts out as good and then becomes corrupt, and then it becomes evolutionarily illegitimate, and then it falls. And so, in each time you go through that, it goes through the Machiavellian cycle each time. And then once the original equilibrium falls that was created, then you go through the next stage. You go from monarchy or tyranny to group rule of aristocracy, then they become oligarchy, and then so on and so on. So you actually go through Machiavellian cycles, which then pushes you through each of the Polybian cycles. And the Polybian cycle with the Machiavellian cycle actually represents an evolutionary cycle about, and this is what Plato and Aristotle were working out. They knew this. So did Polybius. The Greeks knew it. They understood two patterns of evolution, and they actually would document those evolutionary patterns. We lost it to history. Machiavelli rediscovered the Machiavellian cycle. I had already read Polybius the last 20 years. I love the Second Punic War and Scipio Africanus, so I already knew the Polybian cycle dead. When I went to go apply this, it immediately popped in my head. Like I didn't even. By the way, when you read The Prince of Evolution, keep this in mind. I did no research. I did almost all of that purely off memory because I've been reading this stuff my whole life. I love it. And the same thing with Sun Tzu. All the examples I use, I just made sure I got the dates right and some of the facts. But overall, I already knew everything. It's a passion of mine my whole life. Anyway, 3 points.